Hi, welcome back to another episode of my Processing Subscriber Images videos. This image that we're working on today was sent in to me by Gary Carr, who took this beautiful image of Algonquin Park in northern Ontario. And he simply sent this in and asked for me to see what I can do with it in Photoshop to bring the best out of it. So I think we can do that in relatively few adjustments. We're starting off with a really strong image already. So we'll move over to processing that in Photoshop in just a second. Before we do that though, remember that if you like this video, please just give it a thumbs up to let me know. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, then just hit that subscribe button to make sure that you're reminded and you won't miss any future videos. So with that said, let's move over to Photoshop. All right, here we are in Photoshop with Gary's image open. Now, I haven't really done anything to this in Lightroom or Camera Raw, except for a little bit of sharpening and noise reduction. So what we're basically looking at is the raw file. And I'm just going to run you through real quick the handful of adjustments that I think are going to make this image really, really pop. So then from there, I won't run through the entire workflow because I think the majority of the transformation of this image is going to come from just a handful of adjustments. The first of which is going to be concentrating on the foreground. So what I really like about this is these icy tips of whatever this vegetation is here in the foreground. With them being white, they're going to stand out really nicely against the background. Those bits in between where it's darker and not frosty. So this first adjustment I'm going to add, which is, surprise, surprise, the levels adjustment, is I'm only going to look at how this is affecting the dark foreground. So I'm going to grab the white point slider here, grab it and shift it towards the left, and then I'll grab the midpoint here and move that towards the right. And I'm just going to see if this is overexposing anything in the foreground. Clearly it's overexposing the sky, but that's okay. So I'm going to hold Alt or Option on the keyboard and click on the control point here. I'm just going to keep pushing and just see how far I can go until that foreground overexposes. It's probably about here. So that's actually probably brighter than I really want at the moment. So let's just bring it back. And I think that's a good amount of contrast there. So let me just toggle this off and on. Okay, let's invert the mask. So I'm going to click on the layer mask and on the keyboard press Command or Control and I. Invert that. So now I'm going to use a brush on around about 50% opacity, or maybe let's go to 30. And rather than brush this into the whole foreground, what I'm going to do is just kind of go around with the brush and try and highlight those white, bright, frosty tips. So let's just do that. Just going around the edges, just trying to highlight those bits and pieces, and up here we can get some of this as well through the middle. Just increase the brush size. And let's see how it looks over here on this grass as well. It's probably going to work quite nicely. Add a bit of a lightening effect just to make that pop a little bit as well. And let's see the before and after of this layer now. So that's getting there. I'm just going to do a bit more through the middle. And the beauty of a foreground like this is that you don't have to be super accurate with a brush because it's all so kind of, willy-nilly that it's going to handle any over the lines kind of brush strokes that you make. So, okay, that's good there. Now, I just want to see what this is going to do over here on this kind of lighter, this lighter bushland. Maybe I'll reduce the opacity of this a little bit now. So let's go to 14% opacity. Just run the brush through here. Okay, that's pretty good. We're lightening that up pretty nicely. I think that works quite well. Maybe I'll just decrease the opacity again, increase the brush size and see if we can blend it in against that kind of foggy background there. Just brightening up that foggy background makes it a bit less kind of muddy in a way. Okay, so there's the before, there's the after. Now let's also just see if we can bring it in on the lighter edges of a couple of these trees up here, just for a bit of highlighting effect. Yeah, I probably don't want to do much more than that. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to undo that. Let me grab that black brush. Yeah, I think we'll do that in a separate adjustment. We'll handle these trees in a separate adjustment there. Okay, so as far as our first adjustment goes, I think that's pretty good. Let's just double check and see. Okay, just pushing this even further. Now that we've got the layer mask in place, we can really start to dial in how much this foreground starts to pop. So probably willing to let it go a bit further than I first thought. So let's leave it there. Now we can see we are clipping some of the highlights. It's probably in the foreground a little bit, but depending on, well, yeah, that's not much. But what this is telling us, if I hold Alt or Option on the keyboard and press on there now, you can see that we have overexposed this bit over here. So I'm just going to now kind of undo some of what I did in that distance, in that middle distance. So just going to recover some of that. We don't want to overexpose that. We can again deal with that in just a minute if we want to adjust that. So there we go, that looks pretty good. Happy with that. We've added a real nice pop to the foreground and to the frosty bits and pieces that are in the shade there. So now let's add the next adjustment, and I'm gonna darken the sky with this one. So let's just use a simple curves adjustment. Drag the curve down a bit and just darken the sky, just to really bring the nice blues out in the sky, and also kind of to see what we actually have over here in this misty area. So there's only so dark we can really go until it stops looking real, but I think we're probably around about here. Okay, I'll invert the mask on this now. Let's grab a white brush and just zoom out so that I can sort of sweep in from the edges to bring this effect in. I'm just going to brush through the sky now to darken the sky. Now this, I assume this is a rainbow, this kind of line that's coming up behind the trees there. I don't think there's really much we can do to kind of make the colours in the rainbow there really pop, because it's behind a lot of mist. I think we're just going to have to leave it misty. I don't think there's really any way to kind of retrieve that colour. But I think it's still going to look good. So there, I've allowed the brush also to kind of go over the edges a little bit into the trees there. And again, I don't think that matters too much. If I wanted to be a bit more pernickety, I could use a luminosity mask to make sure that I'm only brushing into the sky. But I think this image can handle not having that. So yeah, with that done, let's have a quick look at the before and after effect of these two layers together. So here, now notice how the brightest part of the shot now is the sky on the before version. And so, if you were to kind of look away and then look back at the screen, the brightest part of the shot is usually where your eye is going to go first. Now, if I re-enable these two layers, then what's happening is I've kind of flipped that around. So because these bits and pieces in the foreground are now the highlights, and I've darkened the sky subtly enough that it still looks real, but it is still darker than these brighter parts, it shifts our focus from the sky to the foreground. And now that we're in the foreground, we're more inclined to let our eye kind of wander about the scene from here as a starting point, rather than up here in a big, bright, kind of empty area. So again, before, and after. So with these two adjustments, I think that's kind of, almost, well, that's giving us almost all of the transformation really from the raw file that we're going to need to turn this into a really great shot. From here on in, it's just going to be fine tuning some, maybe another contrast adjustment, and maybe some highlighting of the colors in the trees up here. So, let's give that a bit of a, let's give that a try. So I'll add a levels adjustment, and just looking at the trees over here, let's just see what a bit of contrast does to those trees. Okay, it's a subtle one. Let's brush it in. So invert the mask, white brush still. Let's go a bit higher opacity on the brush. Just brush it in. Now again, I could use a luminosity mask to apply this. Actually, let's do that. I'm just going to load a luminosity selection that isolates the highlights. So just using the luminosity masking panel, I'm going to start with a 1 on the highlight to highlight one selection. Now let's use a levels adjustment to just tweak this preview so that we've got more contrast in the trees there. Okay, and now let's use this mask. So hit that button, it's going to load that mask, that preview as a selection. You can hide the marching ants, Command or Control H. And now when I brush into this area, it's going to brush this levels contrast adjustment into the lighter side, into the lighter parts of the trees without going into the shadows. So there's a very subtle difference, but one that can be worth it if you've got the time to spend. If you don't have the panel to create that selection, then I'll include a link to a video or to a couple of videos on my channel in the description of this video that will show you how to create and get started with luminosity masking. Okay, that's probably enough for this one in the trees. I don't want to go too far. In fact, I'm probably just going to undo this little bit here. I've kind of gone a bit over the lines there. Looks a bit funny. Now, let me just remind myself. So I think, let's see if we can actually make this foreground pop even more. So I'm just going to turn this layer mask off. So shift click. Okay, so we might be overexposing some of these frosty bits with this adjustment. But if I brush it in gradually and just double up on that effect in the foreground, then I think we can do it in a way that's going to make it pop even more, but without overexposing. So I'm just going to grab this white brush and just start brushing through in a similar way to the first adjustment. And perhaps a little bit more over here, just for that real sort of, just enhancing that frosty effect. Let's go back to this one here and mask this one in. Just on this front edge here, there's a little bit that I missed the first time. Back to the second levels adjustment and just go over those same areas. Okay, so let's turn this off and on again. And yeah, there we go. Let's zoom out. Just another tip, if you watched many of my videos before, then you'll know that I always like to kind of zoom out so that I'm looking at the image in a kind of thumbnail view. Just, it helps. Well, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I just find it helps to kind of summarize in my own mind and just to see the image from afar. You kind of notice things differently than when you're zoomed in and you're right up close. So I think yeah, it looks great in a thumbnail view as well. So maybe the final adjustment I'm going to make, I'm just going to see if we can kind of de-muddy this bit over here. I think we might be able to do that with a bit of brightness, but maybe I'll start by trying to remove some greens perhaps. So let's use a curves adjustment for that. I'm going to grab a green channel and just drag it down. That's kind of turning it more of a sort of magenta-y color. I'm not sure we want that. So what if I reduce the greens and then push the RGB channel up a bit? Let's see how that affects these middle bits. Okay, it's not a bad effect on the image overall. Probably a bit too much magenta, but let's see. Okay, I'm gonna grab a brush, black brush. Let's go like 60% opacity again. I'm just going to brush it out of the foreground now a little bit, just to see how it sort of looks with this effect across the whole sky. Yeah, not sure. Let me start this one again. So let's re-add that curves adjustment. Now I did quite like just a little bit of green being removed. So let's bring it down. There's just a couple of clicks here. So 119 to 116 on that curves point there. Yeah, I think that just takes a bit of green out of the image and helps warm it up a bit. Yeah, I like that. So yeah, we'll stick with that, and then we'll add another adjustment just to see if we can do anything with this this mist over here. So maybe we can let it overexpose a little bit. I'm not sure if it is going to overexpose. No, not like this. Okay, let's put it there. And okay, let's grab that black brush and brush it out of the sky, because that's the bit where this is overexposed. Yeah, I think I quite like that. It helps brighten up that muddy mist in the background, and it also gives the foreground a little bit of a lift as well. So I think with that done, we're pretty much all the way there. Now the only thing I would do beyond this would be to kind of tidy up some of these dust spots or sensor, marks on the sensor. So let's just add an empty layer. Grab the healing brush tool. I'm just going to click on this. Click here, click here. This tool does a really good job usually. You don't have to think too much about it. So yeah, there we go. And let's see, one final thing. Let's maybe add a bit of detail with a detail layer with a high pass filter. So I've got a section down here where we can do that in just one click. So I've got sharpening method 1. If you haven't got the panel, I'll include a link to a video to show you how to do this the manual way, but essentially we're creating a merged copied layer, or a merged copied version of the image as a new layer, and then applying the high pass filter on it to sharpen, and then putting that into overlay blend mode, and then brushing it in with a white brush into a black mask. So I'm just going to brush this detail into the foreground. So I don't know if you're noticing this, depending on the resolution and screen size that you're viewing the video at, but we're just sharpening up a bit of that detail in there. Let's go through the water as well. And there's the before, there's the after. You're probably not seeing that on the screen. So with that, let's just run the output for web action on my luminosity masking panel, and that creates the sharpened, resized version of this image that I'll be uploading and using as the thumbnail for this video. So Yeah, well, that said, thanks for watching, and thanks again to Gary Carr for sending this beautiful image in for me to work on. I hope everybody enjoyed the video, and remember to subscribe to my channel if you're not already and you want to see more videos.